brothers and twins. They came together and created a city. And one was building a wall, and the other one Remus built a taller wall, and he jumped over Romulus's wall. And made Romulus mad, and he killed his brother. Although this also contains an element of fratricide, like the story of Cain and Abel. It's not related, but this kind of illustrates an interesting point in that these two people, these two men, managed to found an entire empire. Now, historically, I kind of question it. I mean, it could be true that there are two men that really did come together and form a city. What I kind of wonder is where the rest of those people come from. How did they form a city?
Wait a second. You ended a sentence in a preposition.
Huh?
You ended a sentence.
From where did these other people come? Because you start with Romulus. What was a city of two men? I mean, just they were the only two dudes in the whole town. So my theory, and this is sort of arbitrary because I haven't really studied Roman history that far back extensively, as much as I've studied like the Republican period and the Imperial period. The regal period I haven't studied as much because a lot of it's sort of speculation, extrapolation. Considering that they only think there were only 7 kings in the 230 years of there were more than 7 kings. They just have lost. A lot of them have been put together into one king. And, actually, that brings me to my point here with Romulus and Remus, is that they may have been, my theory, based upon these homogenizing of like the other kings, is that they may have been homogenizations of 2 entire societies in Latium, which is modern day Campania in Italy. And in Latium, there were these 2 similar cultures. You had the Latins and the Occitans, the Latins and the Sabines, the Latins and the whatever else. Maybe they came together once, these 2 tribes. They were on the Tiber River. Maybe they were even across the river from each other. And they said, why don't we be friends and come together and, pool our resources and so we can better survive. Maybe because the Etruscans are coming from the north and they're mean, and we could build walls and we could, protect our little settlements. Because, civilization was known to the peoples of Italy back then, because you had the Greeks that, had colonies all along the southern part of Italy, and the Etruscans to the north. And so they would have decided, let's create a new kingdom. Let's create a civilization. And they created the Romans. I mean, these 2 people came together, and they probably didn't call themselves the Romans. They probably called themselves something else, the Latins, something similar to that. But maybe they had a disagreement. Maybe because they didn't fully homogenize, maybe they lived in the same community but called themselves by different names, the Romulans and the Remans, that sort of a thing. And this disagreement eventually led to civil war. There's a reason, because for this, the Romans called the fight between Romulus and Remus a duellum. Because in Latin you have bellum. Bellum means war. But you also have a duellum. It's really a duel. Like a gunfight. A duellum is a war. I mean, duellum is where it comes from. But it became duellum. A war between 2 people, to anything. And they refer. I mean, they don't call this a pugna or anything like that. It's not a fight, or certamen or something like contentio. It's not a fight. They don't call it that. the Romans were very, very strict. Their religion was very strict. You said when you went through your rituals, you repeated them exactly as your father did. They did not change anything ever. It was a part of the state, and it was very regimented and regular. Just like the Catholic churches today, everything is monitored and standardized. So they called it a duellum, and they were dead serious in calling it that. That wasn't a poetic choice to call it duellum as opposed to certamen or contentio. Yeah. So my point is, the fact that they call it that, which is a war, implies that Romulus and Remus were two separate tribes that came together to try to create a civilization and had a civil war. That's profound, I think. And remember, this is speculation. But that would be that. I mean, if that were to be true, that would be a markedly different perspective on how Rome was founded. And that brings me to my point about how we perceive stories, because I've gone through extensively, almost ad nauseum, the story of Adam and Eve, and ad nauseum the story of Romulus and Remus. That the stories we tell, the objects in our stories, can be very concrete or they can be symbolic. In fact, forget that. All objects in the stories you tell are symbolic. They're symbolic of something because they affect the way we think about things, they affect the way we feel. That makes them symbols. Everything in a story is a symbol, is an idea, is something that we imagine in our minds. So that's how you tell a story. Stories are told where the things in them are symbolic. It doesn't mean enough just to say I met a bear.
A black bear.
It doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't make you feel.
Yeah.
It's not a symbol. It's not. It's a story, but it's not a. It's only a story. I mean, really and truly, that only would make it a symbol to you. It's not a good story. All good stories.
Are you saying my black bear story is not a good story?
No, I'm not saying that at all. Because the black bear is a symbol. It's a symbol of what would be the word? Like a profound surprise.
Yeah.
This. Because it makes you feel that when you're telling a story, they can imagine in their minds meeting a bear.
Yeah, you describe the tree you're leaning against, and you describe how you grabbed the flashlight and you leaned around the tree, and you turned it on, and there were two glowing eyes staring back at you, and it goes,
yeah, so
back at you.
In that story,
you make all those sounds.
And those are symbols. And so just as all others, these incredibly ancient stories, which I'm so happy survive today, they're symbolic. To interpret them literally would do the story injustice.
And you pass them down from generation to generation.
And they keep being passed down. But you have to remember exactly what they are symbolic. Or the story loses its meaning.
Yeah.
It loses the story of Adam and Eve loses its meaning.
Yeah,
it's a man and a woman instead of men and women, and the development of mankind. It loses that meaning. It becomes insignificant, and it marginalizes the story. It becomes less grand and wonderful. It's two people instead of all of humanity.
If you're not specific about the story you're telling, then it loses something in each translation.
Yeah, you tell the story, and then you can explain your story. There's nothing stopping you from explaining what that means. And then people gain that understanding of that makes the story profound. That makes it amazing. They tell it, and that's what gets the story to pass on.
It sounds biblical to me.
The story won't. No one's gonna retell a story they didn't want to hear. They don't like to hear. No one's going to retell that story. they'll tell a story they like. They'll tell a story that affected them, and they'll